Thank you all for being here with us today at Mont Haven Arts and Cultural Center. We just appreciate you being here so much. And we're so honored that we're able to partner with the Frist and with this incredible exhibition in her place, and these powerful women who are just, I don't even think there's a word, important is silly. It's so much more than important. They are so much more than important. Each artist, what they bring to the table, and what Katie and Laura recognized, and the curators and the people that work so hard to make this exhibition come to life. It's just amazing, it really is. And it's such an honor for Mont Haven to be able to be the home of this event today and bring us all together to learn how this came about and to get some kind of inside scoop. I think one of the best things that can happen is to be able to be in a group like this and talk and ask questions. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna ask a few questions, get a little inside scoop, and then you guys, we're gonna open it up a few minutes for you guys, and then these ladies are gonna be kind enough to sign the books for you that will be on sale in the back gallery. So, as you probably, if you haven't met them, Katie Delmez, to my right, curator of the Frist Museum, and then Laura Hutson Hunter, who edited the book and worked and wrote one of the essays inside the book and worked relentlessly on this wonderful project. It's incredible. If you haven't seen it yet, you've got to make your way to the Frist to see it. It's fantastic. I want to say that we can open up with a few questions right off the bat, but I first want to get a good round of applause for these talented people sitting up here. Now, the question that I have been asked so many times, of course, is how this event even came about, how the exhibition even came about. We know it from reading the book and that it's been a 10-year labor of love, right? And I will just start with Katie to tell us how this came about.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you all for being here. It is really exciting to have this opportunity to speak about a project that all of my shows are very important to me, but this one feels especially close to my heart. So it's really great to be with you this afternoon. You are right. This exhibition actually began to kind of stew in my mind 10 years ago, and actually at the end of 2016, when two artists, who of course are now in the exhibition, Vadis Turner and Jana Harper, invited me and Sarah Estes, who was a writer, an arts writer at the time, to have coffee. And they just kind of casually dropped, well, since, the movers and shakers in Nashville's arts community, it really is very much, tilted towards women. We think we should have a monthly studio crawl where we all get together, we talk about art, and they went on and on and on. And for me, though, it was just a light bulb moment, because even though I had been in Nashville's creative community and the arts community for many years, I had already worked at the Frist for 15 years, I had never looked at the arts community through the lens of gender before. And as they kept talking, I just kind of kept thinking about it and realized that the directors of so many important museums, like Lois Reagan-Ziezel, who is here, were women, or Susan Edwards, like the director of the Frist at the time. There were incredible women writers. Many of the galleries were owned and operated by women. And then, of course, there was the artists themselves. It really seemed to be an outsized number of women artists who were showing their work not only here in Nashville, but outside, across the country, in Europe, and who were receiving prestigious awards and residencies. And unfortunately, the studio crawl never really happened, but that was when the seed was planted in my mind. Well, this is obviously a topic that's worthy of an exhibition. The Frist plans many, many years in advance, and so it takes quite a while sometimes for an idea to be born, for the project to actually for it to actually happen. It first started in one of our smallest gallery spaces. We did a studio visit, 1 day of studio visits, immediately realized we needed more time, more space, we needed to do a publication. It moved to our upper level galleries, which are fine, and that was great. But then it also, we decided, we made a very intentional choice that we wanted to make this exhibition as big and as important as it could possibly be. So it's now in our largest galleries, our Ingram Gallery on the main level. And we also very strategically decided that we wanted it to align with our 25th anniversary. The Frist opened on April 8th, 2001. And so this spring seemed like the right time to really acknowledge and celebrate these incredible women artists right here in our own backyard.
That's wonderful. And Laura, a good question for you, and one that I know that I really specifically am curious about, is how you got involved.
Oh, well, I thank you so much for having us here. I was invited by Katie to come in and sort of speak to her and throw some ideas around for possible publication. From the very beginning, she agreed that it was a good sort of way to get the community involved in as many aspects of the community as possible. The art writers, the essayists in the catalog, the photographer that was shooting the artists' photographs for the biographies is a woman, to really incorporate as many different women who were involved in the community as possible. And yeah, we just had a conversation. I can't remember how long ago it was. It feels like, it's strange. You were saying that this has been 10 years in the making. I was like, it hasn't been 10 years. It was like 2016 or something, right? Like, I cannot believe. So I feel like it was a couple of years ago, but maybe it was 20. I don't know.
I would say it probably was in like 2021-ish. That's for me when I was able to really start to think about the show more seriously. And I would say, one, we invited Laura. She's a part of the story. And also from the beginning, we wanted this project to be collaborative and not just a single curatorial voice, and we wanted to work with a team. In fact, other members of the team include our Director of Community Engagement, Sean Giles, and that in part is because the original space where we planned for the show is a space that goes back and forth between being curated in my department, the exhibitions department, or education. So he and I, we started working together, and it also made sense because he's very aware of, what's happening in our own community through his job. And then we added another member to the team, Cy Clayton. She was our very first curatorial fellow. She added a little bit of age diversity. She's young. She's in her mid-20s. She also is an artist as well as a curator. And she really grew up. Both of her parents are artists. So she grew up really surrounded within this community. And I think one of our takeaways is that the women in our community they're supportive of each other, they're collaborative. So Laura brought, again, being part of the story, and she just brought another perspective and so many great ideas from the very beginning. And so I feel like your project is only enriched by having multiple voices
people you
be
bring
a part
into
of
it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you really do have you guys have a tremendous team. The essays are terrific. I spent the last few days reading the book and looking at every picture, and it's just wonderful. I know Joe Nolan, I saw him earlier. Yeah. He has a piece in the book, and some other great people throughout our community, our arts community, and you're one of the most well-known writers in the arts, I would say. So it was a good selection. You did good. So that's really wonderful. Another good question might be about the title of the exhibition. I mean, In Her Place, that's got to have a few meanings to it. I would think. So tell me, I don't know, you, Katie, I would assume would be the one to answer that?
Well, this was a partnership too. I have to say, I don't feel like I am great with titles for my shows. And so I struggle with them. And that was...
I love coming up with titles.
Yes,
for
and
things.
when Laura said, she was like, I love it,
Yeah.
that's a strength of hers. So she came on board well before we had a title figured out.
Right, yeah. I feel like it was Nashville Women Artists for a while,
Yes.
which was just sort of the loose phrase that we were playing around with, but that wouldn't
very dry.
It wouldn't have been worked.
No,
I mean, one thing that I kept coming back to, a phrase that I kept coming back to, was another one that I knew that we wouldn't use for the exhibition or the catalog title was "just happens to be," because that was a phrase that I feel like in all of our conversations kept coming up again and again. That there were so many amazing artists that we could select to be part of this exhibit, to be part of the catalog, and they just happened to be in Nashville, and they just happened to be women, and they were these people, not to generalize, but the ones that I've spoken with, they're proud artists, they're proud women, they're proud Nashvillians, but that's not the focus. You don't want to box an artist in, so they just happened to be. To me, felt like sort of. I mean, but that would be a terrible name for an exhibition. No one would know.
Well, but isn't that an added bonus that they all were from Nashville?
Oh my
I
gosh,
think that's
amazing!
wonderful.
Yeah.
I think that just makes it even more special.
Right. They're most, I think, of the work in the show was made in Nashville.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
That's to me speaks so well of Nashville, of these artists, yes, but of Nashville as a place to be making art, for sure.
I agree. And it just so happens. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just
that's what I said. Just so happens.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But we also, obviously there's a bit of a double entendre there. Part of the reason why we're doing this show is to correct the historic imbalance in the art world and in museum exhibitions and museum collections, and trying to say that, these women, this is where they do belong. This is their place in the largest, the most visible galleries of the largest institution, visual arts institution in the region. So that's what we're, kind of trying to underscore, kind of tongue in cheek, that like this is their place, not barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen, but right here.
Right. Well, and that's what I was going to say. It just so happens my Curiosity also has in her place. Okay, so when you came up with the idea for the title, and you all agreed on the title, what was the criteria that you used in selecting these particular women artists? That's something that I feel like the title came much later than the title was just something that was in a conversation where it was sort of like we were talking about, or Katie was talking to a lot of different colleagues about what the title could possibly be, and it was almost like a joke, I feel like, and that was picked up on, but it was,
In Her Place started kind of as a joke,
right.
But then we're like, that could actually work. And there definitely is a conversation with our marketing people. It's a wider conversation. At that point, Vanderbilt Press was involved. Mm-hmm. We wanted to get their feedback, but Laura's right. The title almost came last. We knew who was going to be in the show in some ways, or largely before the title was.
And how did you do that selection of the women artists that are in the show?
Well, it's hard. It's really hard because with 28 artists, on the one hand, it feels pretty comprehensive, but on the other, we're just scratching the surface because there are so many other amazing women artists that are working in Nashville. One thing that we quickly decided, and Laura also advised on this too, is we couldn't have photographers in the show because there are so many great women photographers specifically that would have taken up half the galleries. And so we've kind of tabled that for a future project. And so we decided to focus on painters, sculptors, artists that were working with textiles and with installation work. And we really just decided no photographers, no videographers for now. So that was one criteria. And then obviously the artists needed to be living and working here in Nashville. And there were some amazing artists that we loved who moved away during the planning of the project, and that was kind of hard and sad. I will say there are a couple of exceptions to that rule. Sadly, you may know Alicia Henry, a longtime professor at Fisk University. She passed away a little over a year ago, but we felt like because she was a part of the planning from at least 5 years ago when we had started talking to her about the show, and we talked about, we collaborated on what would be in the exhibition. She knew that she would be on the opening wall. That felt acceptable to have her in the exhibition, despite the fact that she had passed away. And then also, since the planning of the project, one of the artists moved to New Zealand, Marilyn Murphy, and one artist went to graduate school, Bezar Aradani. She's at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. But again, they were a part of the planning. Bezar's planning on coming back. So those are, I know, kind of more like administrative things, but in our mind, you do try to stick with a parameter. But in terms of the more conceptual side of who to include. That is, from the beginning, obviously, like Nashville has been a focus of the show. I mean, we were thinking about notions of place, even if that wasn't the title. That was something that we were certainly considering with the exhibition as a whole. So in terms of the artists that we did pick, we selected artists that we felt like place was a part of their practice. And as we like to say, whether it's the literal view outside their studio window of a garden, or a moment in time, or a connection to an ancestral place. So those were some of the guiding principles for us of what we were thinking about and as we made our selections.
Terrific. One of the most fun things that I do through the years in the arts is finding artists. And I have and I know you've done this too. I know you both have. Trudged through back acres to find an artist and gone to the most unbelievable places to get to their work, to see it. So I can imagine that there was some time spent on going out and actually researching and finding these women, right? And was there like a group of people that chose, or did you have individuals that you kind of broke off and?
Well, I should say that there were definitely a core group of women that the project kind of started with, again, who I would say are kind of these mid-career, middle-aged rock stars, really, who are showing their work, again, all over the country, who are, Emily, I think, has a show in Berlin that opens in a few weeks. So there were definitely, who I saw as some of the obvious choices, artists that, like, we definitely needed to be showing in the museum. So there was the core group, and then, it is my job to go to openings, to go to galleries, to go to studio visits, and so the list kind of grew and expanded. Laura, when she came on board, she definitely pointed us to some artists that we weren't familiar with, like Shannon Lucy, who's a huge star in the show.
So good.
And somehow, I had never met her or seen her art.
And she's really, really proud to be in the show, too, and she's a very, very proud Nashvilleian, and she had never had, a proper Nashville show. She's shown in, New York, Milan, and
Paris.
Her work is wonderful. I love her work. And Marilyn Murphy. Now, I've been a Marilyn Murphy fan forever.
And the pairing of Marilyn and Shannon together, that was all Katie's, of course. And that was, what a good sort of, I don't know.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The choices were tremendous. The exhibition is just brilliant from the beginning to the end as you go through it.
Thank you.
So I know there was a lot of good thought brought into your selections.
Well, thank you. And speaking of that, so if it started with these core kind of middle-aged women, we also wanted it to be intergenerational.
Yes.
And so we very intentionally selected a handful of artists like Marilyn, who had been working here in Nashville since the 80s, long before Nashville was its city, long before the Frist had opened. And that was kind of a sub-story of the overall exhibition, was kind of like, gee, look how much the art community has grown in Nashville over the last 25 years. We like to think maybe we play a little role in that, but just obviously the city has changed, and yet it also felt very important to honor the ladies, the women who've been doing this for much longer before Nashville was so hot. And then we also included a handful of younger artists just to also speak to the next generation.
And one of the things, if I may, just there's another exhibit that's inside of In Her Place. It's at the Frist right now. That's not part of the catalog, but it's the Barbara Bullock solo exhibition. And that, to me, I feel like really is a great way to sort of ground this new talent with this, while still recognizing that this is not. This is we're now we are able to give these people their flowers, but they have long been making relevant work, really extraordinary work.
Right.
Barbara Bullock passed away in 1996.
Yeah.
Just to underscore that for those of you who didn't know.
And actually, I had the honor of meeting Barbara Bullock in the 90s at the Tennessee State Museum with Lois. And it was quite an honor, and she was quite a talent.
Yes. I hear she was quite a character.
And
I'm
she
very
was
sorry
a real
to
character.
not
I
admit.
really liked. I only met her the one time, but she was a real character. Yes, she was. Yeah. And before we go into letting everyone ask questions, and I want to ask, what do you think, or where do you see, or what is the plan with In Her Place? When it closes, is there any talk of maybe a touring exhibition, or any talk of?
That is a really good question. Of course, the Frist, when we do organize our own shows, it is very rewarding for them to go to other museums. A whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears and resources go into that. So we may as well have them seen by as many people as possible. And we talked about that with this exhibition, but it really felt like it was so. So specific to Nashville, it was hard to think who else would want this exhibition except
Monhaven. It would have to be scaled down just a tiny bit maybe, but we really can hold a lot of art. You'd be shocked. Yeah. And we don't plan 5 years out.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, good to know. Good to know.
Well, I think that was
we got room at the Papillon Ruth, that we're teasing. But yeah, so you're not.
So we do not have plans to travel it. The show will close on April 26th, and the work will get dispersed. And so it's a very special moment right now to come see the exhibition.
And it's a great reason to really put a lot of effort and intentionality to the.
We are so sorry. Leave it to us to have a.
Former arts administrator.
Yeah, that's a good way to
just give it to John. He'll take it out.
Good reason to think about the catalog as being sort of like a permanent version of the exhibition. It's like exhibitions exist on museum walls, of course, but they also exist in the community and in book form. And that was one of the reasons why I know that Katie and her colleagues were really adamant about making sure that the catalog was something we could all be really proud of, not just for the duration of the exhibition, but long after.
Yeah, 100% correct. It will be around long after the show closes.
And the book, the catalog they're referring to, which is like a cocktail table book, is what it is, which is wonderful.
Cocktail table, I love it.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's what I call it, cocktail table book. That's my.
I love that.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful. The cover is beautiful. So it's just a lovely book. But that will go on and on. So it will be a representation of this well thought out exhibition, beautifully curated, a lot of attention to detail. You guys should be really, really, really proud of what you've done, because I know the community really is. Why don't we open up just a little bit of questions? That way we can get going and you can get your book signed and get you one. Yes, ma'am. Ruth Chase.
Yes. Could you describe the selection process once you found the artist? How did you go choose the work?
Okay, so Ruth wants to know how you chose the work after you got the artist.
Mm-hmm. Not the artist.
Yeah, not
Right.
the artist, but the work.
That's a great question. And I'm lucky enough to have worked at the museum for a long time, and I know my galleries well. And so it literally is, it starts in the very general, one of the artists we knew we wanted to do, actually a few of the artists we knew we wanted to give entire galleries to so that they could do kind of full, almost immersive installations. Exactly, Rahela Filsufi being one, Jana Harper, when you ask, that's what I do, again, is constantly going to visit with artists and going to their studios, and I had seen Jana's, she had an installation at Vanderbilt in maybe 2021, and I knew that was the body of work that we wanted to show. So it kind of starts generally, and then it's like, well, what these artists would, when I thought about Materiality and Memory, the first two galleries, and Jody Hayes and Vadis Turner, they made sense, and Alicia Henry, just to kind of sketch it out a little bit. And so once you knew the space, then you could look at the artist's work. We went to the studios. Of course, you go to their websites. And you make your selections of what you're drawn to. Again, we were kind of honing in on this idea of place, so that helped guide us a bit. And then you also are thinking about what will look good together. Once I knew those artists were going to be together, we didn't do this intentionally, but a lot of blue ended up being in the show. So kind of thinking about that. So size, how it worked with the other artists that were going to be in that gallery space. Some artists wanted to make new work, which they always do, and some artists did do that. So Jody Hayes, for example, we knew of the two existing pieces, and we said, okay, you have this big wall, you can make something new for that, and that's always a wonderful treat to see what they come up with. So a lot of different kind of combinations, but it all just kind of comes together. But it's always in dialogue with the artist. It's a collaborative conversation. What did they want to see? Here's kind of the ideas that we had, and then you just come to a mutually agreeable solution.
Another question? Yes, ma'am.
In going to these different art galleries, what surprised you the most, or what could you tell us about some of these studios?
When you're looking at different artists, maybe what intrigued you, or?
I would say, broadly speaking, one of the most interesting takeaways for me was what a global arts community we have in Nashville now, which I think has changed a lot since the 80s and 90s. An artist like Rahela, who came, who is Iranian-born, she's been in Nashville since 2020, I think in the States since maybe the 2016 or so. We have Maria Magdalena Campos Pons, who's a Cuban-born artist, Janira Vasepo, who was born in Puerto Rico. That was, to me, just Sesavan Potavang, she was born in Laos, and so that's just kind of like the international composition of the art community. That was something that wasn't necessarily looking at it like going to galleries, but just kind of look as a whole when we zoomed out, that became really clear. So that was maybe my biggest surprise. What about you, Laura?
Well, I was just thinking that I just interviewed a man who's a photographer who moved here about a year ago, and he said that he moved here from London, and he's Welsh, and he said that Nashville has a reputation for having some of the best women photographers, artists who happen to be photographers, who happen to be women, who happen to work in Nashville. Internationally, that's a reputation. He couldn't tell me why either, but he did mention that artists, he said photographers, but I think artists as well, work like musicians work, where they get into an idea, they come up with some sort of like an archive, a project, a series, and then they show it to people, they tour it around, and then they come back and I thought that was an interesting takeaway, and I have no idea if that is, as a writer, I like analogies. Well, so when you compare an artist to a musician, I'm like, okay, I can put my mind around that.
A great comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, they go hand in hand. When we first became Monhaven Arts and Cultural Center, when we rebranded, our very first exhibition was a female photographer, Nancy Lee Andrews. She had a book out, A Dose of Rock and Roll. She, of course, was with Ringo for a number of years, so she toured and has...
She's got an album coming out.
Yeah, it'll come out this summer, I think. But the photos she has are spectacular, and I was so happy to get Lois and I put that together to get to bring a female photographer as our very first exhibition. So I've always known that Nashville is filled with some wonderful photography, men and women, but women specifically, yes.
Yeah, I was just, but the way that the artists might work like musicians, I feel like is interesting. I didn't go to any of the studio visits with Katie, but I do know some of these artists, and they do have. I know Kimia Ferdowsi Klein has an interesting studio that she's built. She built herself and worked with an architect that has a lot of like a fantastic light. And one thing that I did learn about artists, I think through Vadis Turner, who is one of the artists in the show, who also has a piece outside.
And her studio is just not far away at all.
That's right.
Where is it?
Oh, it's fantastic.
You have to tell me.
It's her family home.
Oh, well, yeah. I want more info on that.
But she's told me early on that when she was working in New York City, her studio was a New York City studio. And you have working as for a visual artist to live in New York and to work in New York that's sort of always been the goal, right? But she realized that when she moved back home, back to Nashville, out of her Sumner County studio, she was able to fit bigger canvases in her studio because it was bigger. She was able to see out the window to watch storms coming in instead of watching storm systems on YouTube. And so her work really, and she got a lot, even though she was no longer in New York City, she was living in Nashville, her work really developed in a way that it did because of the studio that Nashville allowed her to have, yeah.
I can totally see that.
Yeah, well, and just I think generally the stories that we heard about people coming to Nashville, some came for the universities. A lot of folks left New York for that quality of life that Laura's speaking to, being able to have a decent studio. For many of them, they had children, and it just wasn't feasible to live in New York City anymore. And they wanted to be closer to family, help with childcare, and so some real just very human reasons brought a lot of people here. And some folks kind of came like not sure it was going to turn out, and 10 years later like they couldn't be happier, and they feel like they're a part of a very supportive and energetic creative community.
Yes, sir.
Kind of a related question. I actually came down here from Philadelphia. I had a huge slumlord loft up there, which would be ideal for a lot of artists. And I came down here to be closer to nature. But so related question, were there any like hovels or really just crazy places?
Of the studios? Oh, that they went to?
Did you go to a hovel?
Yes, 'cause I find that whole subject fascinating. Like some people work just so clinically, and then you have like the Francis Bacons that are just,
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, Alicia Henry is definitely not a hovel, but her studio is super fascinating.
Yeah, in her home upstairs.
I would not say it was a hovel at all.
No.
record.
But it's there's such a range of studios, and a lot of them are in the home. One room of a home. For Alicia, it was the second floor, the second story of her home, and other people like Kimia or Vadis have these huge light-filled studios, as you say. Some people, their studios are at the university, so sometimes they're smaller. Magda, for example, has a tiny little studio at Vanderbilt, which is such a shame. But I would say there's just a real range of studios, and all of them seem to really kind of just fit the artist and the way they make the work. And there really isn't a standard. Nothing like struck me as being like a wrong one or in any way. I do think except Magda, she needs a bigger studio. But they all just felt very personalized, I would say. Yeah.
Another question? I think I saw a hand go up a minute ago. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I was wondering, considering the title of the body work called In Her Place, of course, being the tough person I am, and as old as I am, I kind of always go back to how are women artists in particular being received throughout the artistic community, not on an individual basis per se, but are they being able to be hung in more galleries more so than, say, maybe the 80s and 90s? Have you seen an advancement over the years? Because you seem to have been in for a little bit now to maybe make a comment whether or not that's happened.
Do you want to do Katie Hessel's quote? Or what do you want to say?
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to say that since the women's liberation, which wasn't actually that long ago either, women having being able to contribute to the income of a household. I know the Frist isn't a collecting institution, but there are much more women collectors now than there have been previously, and also women sort of, I don't know, this is a really broad generalization, but it seems to me like a lot of the times they'd make the decisions about what the house looks like and like what they want to have on the walls. And so being able to identify with the painter, even if they don't necessarily set out to collect artists or art from women, being able to sort of feel like they identify with the work a little bit, I think maybe values it a little bit more, but it's still, I mean, there's still a long way to go.
Exactly. We invited Katie Hessel, who is a well-known London-based podcaster and author. She started a podcast probably at least 10 years ago called the Great Women Artists Podcast, and she did a book not too long ago. And we invited her to write just a very short foreword, and she asks, why now? Do we still need shows like this? And she answered the question with yes, even as recently as in the 2020s, just a fraction of museum exhibitions and museum collections are devoted to women. So there is a correction happening, but it is happening at a slower rate than one might want. But this show, we think, plays a big part of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great first step, but and a necessary first step, but it is a first step.
Yes.
To lead into that, I was going to say, with regards to, the Frist and different museums, John Carlos, the conductor of the symphony for many years, the Nashville Symphony, he was so important in bringing contemporary and a lot of local classical composers' work to introduce. So I think that he gave these local contemporary composers a platform for their music to be heard. I think it's really important that the Frist and our local museums give that platform, give that space for female artists, because historically it's just like in classical music, it's been a male-dominated, and that's fine. But I think there's an obligation, maybe, if I could use that word, that these institutions have a platform. Let's bring in. Yeah.
I mean, I absolutely agree with that. And at the same time, the exhibition is not. This is not charity work. These artists would not be here if it was just women.
Right.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point, Laura. And I say I've said since the show opened, I will walk anybody from London, Paris, New York, LA through our exhibition with our heads held high, because these women are of the same level as any other artist working in other cultural capitals. And in fact, I toured a group through from New York yesterday, and they were all just like, wow, they just had no idea that Nashville, of course, we've got our amazing musicians, and we also have some great visual artists too.
Yes, ma'am, Ruth.
How would you describe local, there's a lot of different art in the show and a lot of different focus, but a lot of times people ask us, how would you define the local art scene here in Nashville? How would you define what type of art in general is coming from the local women's movement at this point?
Great question.
Is there a particular,
I mean, I don't know that you can say.
I mean, I've thought about this a little bit, and in the exhibition or the essay that I wrote for the catalog was about basically trying to define what it meant, what the commonality between all of these women artists is. And the only thing that I could come up with was that they are comfortable being underdogs. There is something about being a woman in the South, maybe, or a woman in 2026, or whenever they were making this work, that gives you a real knack for being able to disrupt things, you know, or like it makes you feel a little bit like comfortable being a little bit of a rebel. And so a lot of the work, I would say, pushes against expectations.
Yeah, that's a great answer.
I'm sitting here thinking, boy, we could really get into a great conversation. Couldn't we? Yeah, I'm ready to get going. Yeah, okay, but we don't have all day for that, but I could. Yeah, that's some good questions, real good questions. Well, one thing I will say, just to add to this, is Sumner County, and of course Davidson County, we're right here, has some tremendous female artists. Mm-hmm. We are so proud of that. And Ruth, our director of our local and regional arts, we work hard to seek them out. We don't care what county they're in, but just locally. And we have found and unearthed some phenomenal female artists. So we're very excited, and we feel like we've got some great things. They're still outnumbered. There's no question about that. They just are because more men. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just say something to that? I find we have a wonderful male artist in our back gallery right now, Jim Sheridan. But honestly, when I'm out there looking at local artists that are either early or mid-career, I'm having trouble finding as many men.
Well,
that are, because
agreed.
the women are out there, just like, they're easier to find and they're pushing harder, is just what I'm seeing. And in the intro mid-level.
Well, I think I'll add to that, Ruth, as something Lois had said earlier when she met the wonderful ladies here. Women are pushing harder. I think that they're getting out there more, having their voices heard more, having their art seen more because of that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's happening. I think it's organically happening because it's, there's a lot of talented women out there. There's a lot of talented artists. Yes. But a lot of talented women out there, so we're hearing more and more from them. And it's things like this that you guys have done that are really helping to move that forward.
Well, and one more generalization I would say is they are ambitious and they are very hard working, and they are out there, and they're dreaming big, and it's happening for them.
And there's something that's very sort of, again, this is a generalization, but there's something very female about like nurturing community. Yes. And not having a competitive sort of spirit, I think, that really helps.
Yeah, I mean, not to be corny or to lean into stereotypes, but I would say that the women artists are very supportive of each other, and that when one person gets an award, they all celebrate because, it lifts everybody up. And that was something that maybe going into it, I wasn't sure that was going to be the case, but in fact, the connection and the support and hearing, one artist talking about, when I moved here, so-and-so reached out to me and we had coffee and, I connected with Coop. There was definitely a lot of collaboration and support within that community.
I know there's a hand that keeps going up. Yes, someone, wasn't it? Okay. Jim, did you raise your hand?
I did not.
Okay, I thought someone did. I thought someone else's hand went up, so I wanted to make sure I had not ignored.
Well, and I guess I just want to say, in your presence, sir, that this is by no means like a male bashing project. My Joe Nolan is a longtime friend and colleague. The chief curator, Sean, of course, the chief curator, Mark Scala, has been my boss for 25 years. Lane York has been at Zeitgeist forever. Jamal Sheets is at Fisk, so it's certainly, we're not trying to discount or discredit the role that they have played, but when you look at it just by the numbers, there's a lot of women out there.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I decided to raise the hand. I've given a lot of workshops in my life, in my line of work. And when I started doing more adult workshops, I saw these women doing incredible work who laid down their careers to have a family. And then they started up again. And I've never been comfortable with that. I know of one guy who laid down his career to start a family. So I guess my question would be, are you seeing that there is more of a life-work balance in this 21st century than there has been in the last 60 years?
I think so, and I think that this was another surprise, which should have been maybe obvious, is, again, so many people are here because of the life-work balance that they can have in Nashville raising children that they couldn't have in New York. I mean, and that we just heard that over and over again, whether it was space, affordability, help with childcare with other family members. So I think that is definitely true within the arts community. I've also, Laura and I are both mothers, and I would say too, sadly, one of the few long-term good things that came out of COVID is also there's just more flexibility, and you don't have to pretend you don't have children anymore. They're in your Zoom calls, now they know they exist, and that just can't go back into the, the bottle. And if I have to go pick up a sick child or camp is out early, like that, I feel like there's more tolerance for that. Just broadly speaking. But I just want to say that was one of the first things, Laura, that when we were talking about the catalog, and you brought up how are we going to talk about motherhood, and I was almost hesitant because I didn't want to how do we present this in a way that isn't, you don't want it to be sappy, or are we reinforcing negatives? There's it's a complicated topic, and I really love the way that the approach that you took and some of the authors that you pitched, and appreciated your no, we have to talk about it.
Yeah, I think that the idea that motherhood is a important and essential place to make art from is such a great sort of way around not sort of apologizing for being a mother, and feeling like you shouldn't show your motherhood in the artwork that you make.
This is more a comment to what you're talking about. I mentor young people, and I was giving a book to a pastor's daughter for her graduation. And I watched Maria Shriver and Oprah do an interview, and they were talking about, this is what I went when I went to Delmez. I don't know what I want to be, so should I be in college? I should drop out. I don't want so many because I don't know what I want to be. But telling young people, it's different than it used to be. Women can be anything, any moment, any phase in their life. You're not just going to be an artist for your whole life. You're not just going to be, you're a mother. Like with her, in her 20s, she was a climbing reporter. In her 30s, she was a mother. In her 40s, she was the first lady of California. She's not defined by one thing. She is many things. As women are, we're very diverse, and we're multitaskers. My favorite thing on the internet is there's this guy, he's got a bad potty mouth, but he's a black man talking about showing women taking things in their hands, and it's, man, women get done. Throwing a raccoon off of a cat and taking a dog off another kid. We're just, we're in different places, and that's the best thing about being a woman. We can be complex and not be ID'd as a mother, ID'd as an artist. We can do pretty much do it all. Yeah. Yes.
Hi. Just wondering if we might tease that out a little bit more, what you were just discussing about the sort of the presence of parenting, the presence of motherhood in work. I think about something like, this isn't a starting point, but we'll just use it as one, like Mary Kelly's postpartum document, right? Which is this very literal, concrete, these are the stages of my child's development. Here is it documented and displayed. And I'm just wondering, sort of, we'll use that as a sort of faux benchmark, and then 50 years to now. How have you seen that expression of parenthood, that expression of motherhood change? And then whether you've seen what types of changes, what types of developments within this Nashville, Middle Tennessee scene that you've seen over X amount of time in the ways that parenthood, motherhood has got aid in the work.
That is a phenomenal question. And it might be a little more than...
Well, I feel like one of the things that this sort of new generation of artists is picking up on is that parenthood and motherhood doesn't have to stay in the margins of work. That it is an important place to be working from. It's something that is worthy of consideration and thoughtfulness and scholarship. In ways that, and if you consider that, it opens up this whole history of intellectual sort of consideration and thought that had been under the radar for so long because it had been so marginal.
Yes, that's very good. Yeah. Well, now, does anyone else have a question before we go and let these ladies sign the book? And I know some of you want to take this home. As we talked about, this will be the keepsake, so to speak, something you can keep forever to have the memories. You have one to show. I do have one to show right here behind. Oh, no, wait, I do. It's right here. Right here in her place and in the back gallery. It's just lovely. And it's just filled with incredible art from the exhibition, great essays inside here. Really good. You guys, I spent the whole last few days reading it, and I went back in and reread some of it. It was so good. So when I call it that cocktail table book, it's still a good read. So have fun with it, and I hope you'll all buy one today and take it home. We appreciate you again. We thank all the staff here at Monhaven. We thank the Frist again for being so benevolent and sharing time with us, with these talented people, and that we're able to be a small part perpetuating and promoting a program like this and an exhibition like this. Be sure and go. It's up through
April 26th.
Okay, up through April 26th. I know some of our staff has already been twice. So, yeah, so multiple times. So enjoy. If you have questions, I'm sure they'll answer them for you, but this will be a good time to get a bite to eat, and there's wine and coffee. Okay? Well, listen, thank you again so much for being here.
Thank you so much.
Yes, we appreciate you greatly. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.